So I'm going to go ahead and move on to some of the other stuff we're going to talk about, and primarily that's going to be an alert configuration, and that's really the meat and potatoes of this tool, right? What are these alerts, and how are we collecting them, and what are we looking at? And so, as you can see, SharePoint 2018A is now getting metrics. So let's go to this alerting section. Now, the first thing we'll notice is that we have two different buttons, alert thresholds and default alert thresholds. Basically, default alert thresholds just got applied to SharePoint 2010A when I added it. This is the default template that's going to get added to new servers when they're added to this installation, or new farms, whatever the case may be. So this is like a baseline, the starting point, so to speak. And for me, it contains a bunch of stuff, pretty much everything I care about, right? Out of the box, it's just all these different check marks. And that's fine. So this is the default, right? However, if I have a server selected and I click alert thresholds, it's going to give me a separate template, so to speak, specific to that server scope. So now we see server SharePoint 2013B and the alert configurations for this specific server, right? As opposed to default alert thresholds, which is just straight up default thresholds for all new farm servers and pages. So that's honestly an oft overlooked distinction. And the point of this is that we can be collecting from different things for different servers, right? So obviously on the SQL server, I don't care about things like content summary collection and WFE stats. And honestly, those won't even be included in the server-specific alert thresholds for a SQL server. But again, if I have multiple SQL servers, maybe some of them I care about fragmentation on, some of them I don't, et cetera, right? So as we can see, we can really tailor what we are collecting from a specific server. So I'm going to go ahead and use a use case in this particular SQL server. I've got an alert here, a critical alert, and that alert is max server memory. Now, in the last meeting, I mentioned max server memory in my case is showing the value at 2 terabytes, right? And that's crazy. It's only an 8 gigabyte memory server. Whenever you have a server set to use everything available, its max goes to this default value. And that's kind of how I've got my SQL server set up. I've got my SQL server set up so that I don't want to max. I want you to use as much memory on the server as you can. Whatever's available, use it because you are a dedicated SQL server, right? Because of that, it doesn't make sense for me to have warnings and criticals set at 16 and 32 gigs respectively, since I'm never going to be, I'll always be critical since my maxes are always set to that, right? So in my case, I don't need or want to see this particular alert. So what I'll do is I'll go into my alert thresholds for that SQL server, and I'm literally just going to turn off that specific alert. So I'm going to go down to my SQL Server section. You can see here I've got max server memory, and I can, right off the bat, I can see what my warning and threshold is currently set to, but more importantly, I can see what that value has been at over the last 7 days. And this is a very useful little tool right here, this little graph, and pretty much most of the metrics for which a graph like this would be relevant have this. Obviously, things like Booleans and true-false values probably wouldn't have something like this, but at any rate, you can see the average value right here has been at the 2 terabyte mark. It means that, hey, I'm always going to have that. It's always going to be there. I know that. Why don't I just deselect and remove that particular alert from my thing? I don't need to be alerted about max server memory at this point because I know I'm going to be using whatever is available on that server. So by that respect, I'll probably be more interested in the actual server memory values, right? So I've turned off max server memory. You notice here there's a little pencil icon meaning it's been edited, and there's another pencil icon down here letting me know that, hey, metrics have been changed in your list in case I'm up here somewhere, right? So if I look up at server, so here's the things that I'm really more interested in, right? Memory usage. Now I can see, hey, where's my memory usage really been over the past few hours, percentage-wise, right? So right now I've got it set to warn me when it's above 75%, and then critical me when it's above 90. And you can see those two lines there. The yellow line represents the warning, and the red line represents the critical. For instance, if I change that, you'll see that yellow line move down, right? So anyway, it's a cool little visual representation of the metric history, and it's really useful for determining baseline statistics for your thresholds. So this is a really simple example, but hopefully that gives you some idea of what kind of things you can do here. So now that I've edited my threshold and removed that max server memory value, I want to apply that to this template. So I'm going to apply changes only, and this is specifically for the SQL Server. Hit OK. So now those changes have been made to this SQL Server template. So if I wanted to, I could apply it to other servers. It isn't really relevant for me personally, but I could also save these values as the new default. This will write those to that default alert threshold so that future SQL servers will be added and use that max server memory value that I've disconnected or deselected. I don't want to do that because I don't know what my future SQL servers, if any are added, will be set to. So I'm going to leave the changes applied only to the SQL server, and then I'm going to OK those changes. So now, if I go back to the alert thresholds, I should see, unless there's some unknown bug, I should see max server memory is no longer checked, right? So now when I reconnect and recollect metrics here, that alert status should change, and we should see max server memory no longer at critical once this completes. There we go. So my critical alert is gone. Now I just have the other warnings about log file size, etc. Here's another one that might be worthy of deselecting. In fact, I'll go ahead and do it. There's a Boolean alert set to let you know if and when a SQL server is hosted on a virtual server. And we can change that as well. But moving along, let's see. So that's updating thresholds. Great. So responses. So we've got all these metrics coming in. And by the way, if I want to know anything about a specific metric, I've got this knowledge base tab, and I can literally go through and see all the different metrics that we're collecting and read a little bit of blurb about it, right? So for instance, my max server memory. I get a little bit of information here about what that metric really means. By default, SQL Server attempts to use all available memory, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the memory used by all processing the servers should have between 1 and 2 gigabytes, yada, yada, yada. So there's just a little bit of knowledge base information from TechNet articles and the like. And I can actually add my own information here. See what I mean? So now that's added for me. So now when I go back in here, I can see that if I need to review what was it I said about max server memory? Let me see here. I'll go in here. I'll jump in. Ah, that's right. If I'm using no cap, I need to disable that alert. Right. So at any rate, this is a good place to keep notes on these things because, I mean, even though we gather as much information as we really can in terms of what's available from Microsoft and best practice documents and so on and so forth, but maybe in your studies you've learned something about the particular metric that's relevant to your particular environment. You might want to jot into this knowledge base. So this is a helpful little place to keep tabs on what you're collecting and why. We provide what we can, but again, it's not going to cover everything. I'd be lying if I told you that I knew everything about every one of these specific metrics and how to use them and what they mean. I mean, it's a lot of information. This is all based on several scopes. I mean, from Windows OS monitoring to SharePoint monitoring to SQL monitoring, right? So it's a lot of data, a lot of information. There's going to be a learning curve. So at any rate, what I'm getting at is this is a great little place to keep tabs on your notes and learn more about the metrics that we're collecting. Fred is asking the very next question, and it's a really great question. He asks,